Hello everyone, welcome to the podcast Thinking with T.
Welcome to the Thinking with T podcast. My name is Tommy Adedeji. With me on the show today is Dr. Ndubuisi Egbim. He's a doctor, he's a medical doctor here in the United Kingdom, and he's also a very driven person. I mean, my interactions with him, he's an entrepreneur, and he's going to be talking through some of his experiences in terms of medicine and, being an entrepreneur doctor as well, and perhaps, you're planning to move to the UK, you're probably already in the UK, you might find one or two useful tips to take from here. So anyway, without much ado, welcome to the podcast, Dr. Ndubuisi.
Thank you for having me, Tommy. Thank you for bringing me on your podcast.
And thank you for agreeing to come on board. We had a few mix-up with the timing and all that, but finally we are here, and it's all good. Okay, in terms of being a medical doctor in the UK, how's the experience been like? What's the experience been like for you?
Well, it's been quite an interesting experience. So as a doctor, I'd say the better part of 3 years, or going to 4 years now. But prior to that, I worked as a doctor in Nigeria before I took a break from medicine to go and do health system strengthening, health management, mostly NGO kind of stuff. So coming to UK, medical practice was entirely a different experience. It was still the same medicine, but the systems were different, and I found I started to like the clinical practice of medicine.
Okay.
And I actually did in Nigeria. Yeah, so it's been quite an interesting experience, and it's a wide and varied experience, and I think I've enjoyed every bit of it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think that's is it because in terms of the environment, is it because there are a lot more provisions for is it that you're better remunerated, or in what in what way?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I mean, from the we'll probably look into US because they have like the best probably regarding pay. But in UK, it's not so much about the pay as the systems in place. So if you remember a saying from Obama, I think he said Africa needs strong systems, not strong men. I can't remember if it was Obama that said that. So the UK system is set in such a way, it's not relying on you to be a hero or an absolute genius to remember everything. When we're trained in Nigeria, we're trained in such a way that you're supposed to know everything from your head. In fact, you're supposed to be this superstar. You're not supposed to be checking things. You're supposed to be really, but the UK system is set up in such a way that there are checks and balances. There's a system in place. There's a system to make sure that you're getting better at what you do. There's a system in place to make sure that you're delivering quality care. And there are checks in place to make sure that if any of that is not happening, then there are systems in place to correct it. So being someone that actually enjoyed their approach to delivering healthcare, and of course, seeing that it's a state-funded healthcare, they're quite very, very careful to make sure that any dime they spend, they actually get the value for that pound.
Now, one would have thought that a state-funded system will be the exact opposite of that. I mean, private people tend to be a lot more efficient. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah. There's a point to be made in that direction. Private people tend to be a bit more efficient and tend to focus more on the bottom line and cutting out waste. But I think it could be a cultural thing, because you get to see it in other aspects of the society as well. It's sort of like a system-based approach where people don't spend money without any sort of accountability. So yes, I agree that private sector be more focused on the bottom line. But if you compare a private sector in UK with some other private sector in other parts of the world, you may realize that a state-funded system may even be far more efficient than a private sector in some other places where that focus on efficiency and the reduction of waste is not actually focused on clearly. And again, in UK, it's not a soulless system that how much you spend or how much you save. Obviously, it takes into perspective things like satisfaction. But at the end of the day, there are measures. Things are being checked. People don't take unilateral decisions or just decide to do random stuff. It's data driven, and there's usually like a database of database of information that guide decisions that are made.
Okay. So away from, I mean, I'm not a medical doctor really, so I'm not trying to get into the technicalities of medicine, how medicine, healthcare is being carried out from one domain to the other. But I'm trying to focus more on you as a person in terms of your own experience, your personal experience, the human story. So how was it like settling in, coming from the UK, coming from Nigeria, given some of the stark differences that you've highlighted, between those two systems? How was it like settling in? I imagine if I'm a doctor, I'm listening to you, I'm planning to take the same journey, kind of like, what would you say to me from your own experience?
It's quite interesting really, because by the time I came to UK, I wasn't planning to practice medicine at all in the UK. And I wasn't planning to stay either. So it's really funny because 2 years before I left Nigeria, I was already doing an NGO job. I left medicine and I thought it was for good. And I was sort of focusing on an NGO working in HIV, TB, and with an organization that was US government. And so the idea was to do my master's, which I came to do. I came to do a master's in University of Nottingham. So I was fortunate to get one of the developing solution scholarships, and came in to do the master's with the idea that when I finish my master's in international health, I'll be able to go back and probably work in Nigeria or any of the African countries. But I quickly found out that it was quicker, in some instances, to attend an interview. I attended an interview in Nigeria on Zoom, and I got offered a position. I didn't get my offer letter till 2 months later. In between, as a backup plan, I had done the licensing exam, PLAB, for practicing medicine in the UK. Now, of course, this was like a plan B, or what I call it a plan C, because that meant going back to practicing medicine after several years. So I had done the PLAB and I attended for NHS job while waiting for this 2 months appointment that would ensure that I go back to Nigeria to pick up a job that would pay me less than an NHS job. But I was happy with anyway, because you don't tend to compare apples with oranges. Even if you get paid a little bit less in Nigeria, I can still live a reasonable life and do what you want to do. But I attended the NHS job. On my way home, I got a text message to congratulate me. Before the end of the day, I got an email with my and within 3 days, I got everything I need for the next step to get my visa to work. So you see the stark differences between systems. And there's a system in place. There's someone to contact you. There's a policy in place. So that was the first step. So I started working in the UK as a doctor, I think 1.5 years after I arrived in the UK, and decided to give it a go to do medicine. So it was quite a different system, because then you're dealing with a different patient group, and you're dealing with different systems. But it was quite an interesting and exciting period. I would say your first 2 weeks, your first 1 month is more like a learning phase, and not necessarily learning medicine, but understanding how things work and how people work. And it's less of actually sort of dropping big diagnosis and hypervalidating words. It's more like being able to relate to the person and to say things like, sorry, and please, and may I examine you? So that when we came to the UK. But thankfully, writing the exam itself prepared us for that sort of practice.
Wow. It's more or less a situation of, another one lost through the inefficient system in Nigeria, kind of. Obviously, if the system had been a lot more efficient, probably you plan on going back? And the interesting thing is, I mean, with the way the world is evolving, the economies are evolving, you really don't have to be restricted by your location, really. For instance,
No.
I mean, my podcast is not really so big yet, but there was a day I was checking the listener, and I've seen listeners from Portugal, from Greece, from funny places like that.
Yeah, you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. Once it goes online, you'll be surprised. One of the blogs I started while I was in med school. I was 21, 22 then. At some point, I had readers from 22 countries, and I didn't know them. I've never met them. So that's the power of the internet. And given the kind of content, Tommy, that you put out there, and it's not like a podcast that's commenting on maybe one event or sports or gossip. So it's sort of evergreen content.
Exactly.
So
that's the idea.
You'll be surprised how relevant it could be to people much later, and then people from these diverse backgrounds. Yeah, so that was the power of the internet.
Yeah, that's it. It means, I mean, to do this for me, I mean, you are in the UK currently. I mean, I've interviewed people who are in Nigeria. I've interviewed someone who's in Denmark, So it just goes back to the point that, one doesn't have to always think about, I must be in Lagos, I must be in this place.
No.
Yeah. Away from that a little, in the last few months, there were a lot of emotions around Black Lives Matter, these, racial injustices and what have you. In terms of your experience being a Nigerian, an immigrant, a Black person in the United Kingdom, what's been your experience like being a doctor?
Yeah, obviously, with the whole Black Lives Matter, it called into attention a lot of things that have already been there.
Yeah.
And obviously, systemic racism and other issues that have been going on and all that. But I think I've noticed why there may be, every now and then, there may be, I'll say, singular issues of, let's say, racism to doctor, where a patient will say, I don't want to be attended to by that person. That hasn't been my experience at all. That doesn't mean that there are not people who have experienced that. I've had friends who said, a patient said, I'll prefer a white doctor. And with the experience was that his workplace said, this is the only doctor we have, and I'm afraid if you're not going to see him, we may not be able to give you another one. It's different. Yeah. So I've got a diploma in sexual and reproductive health from obviously the Royal College here. And we understand that sometimes a female might prefer a female to attend to them for intimate exams, and sometimes a male might also prefer a male. And where when it comes to things like race, is really unacceptable most times. I'd say most people I've seen have not really had that experience, and when they do, they've been backed up by their workplace to say, no, we cannot tolerate racism, and rightfully so, because a large percentage of the staff in NHS are actually not necessarily native sort of British people that were born here. There's quite a few of them that were either moved from other countries. From that point, I'll say not necessarily, but generally racism, I'll say there has been random sporadic incidents. I remember in Nottingham, I think I remember jogging in the night in the middle of the street, and someone has shouted sort of the N word through their car window and all that. And strangely, I wasn't really offended. I was supposed to get offended, but strangely, I couldn't quite. And to be honest, if he wasn't moving so fast, I'd have given him a high five and returned the favor by calling him back the N word, and maybe that could become like some name we could call each other. Yeah, because coming from my background, I'm from Nigeria, and just like you are, nobody use that word, and when people use it, they use it in affectionate terms. So
My
again, yeah, people could say that. Yeah. So basically, I've also had a singular experience in Cornwall. I live in is 97% white, so it's occasionally you run into a black person. I live in an estate where I'm the only black person, and that's pretty normal, and I don't notice anymore that I'm the only black person there. But I've been jogging on the street again in the night, and I think it's a group of drunk, probably, I don't know whether they are teenagers or adults, and they scream through their sort of car, and then they sped off, but not necessarily. Again, I wasn't enraged. Much more maybe angry if I was like a black American, where those words come are racially charged and they really mean something. But given my background, it's not something that really gets to me. Probably because the black experience is different. It's not all one experience. So the experience of the black British may not be the experience of the black British immigrant.
Yeah.
So there's been a few instances, but I can't say that has experience that I've had in the last 4.5 years in the UK.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, for me personally, it's a point I'm always trying to make every time I'm speaking to a much wider audience. That look, there's no single black experience. The way Nigerian will perceive race is different from the way South African will perceive race. Because we have different experiences. I mean, for many of us, we don't even realize that we are black until you step out of the country. Oh, okay, I'm actually black. I mean, I'm different in that
way. You find yourself in a place, and obviously, if you live in Nottingham or out in Albans, you probably see more black people than me. And if you live in the southwest area, it's usually the beachy rural area. It's more beaches and all that. You tend to realize when I first moved there are quite a few Nigerians here now. So when I first moved there, I could actually on the street, if I see a black person, to give them a high five and ask them where they came from. I didn't mind if they are from Jamaica or from Nigeria or Ghana, because it was a rare sight. Now there are quite a few more black people in Cornwall, but it's sort of the way, the setting of the society.
Yeah.
But having said that, I can tell you that I've read and I've seen there's been instances of racism which people have experienced, even right here in this country, and it's not like, oh, get out of here, you use the N-word, or we don't hire this, like that. It's not like apartheid South Africa where they say no blacks, no colored people. In the past, when they would say no blacks, no Jews, no dogs. So it's now a bit more subtle. If you are looking to get into some kind of things or some kind of areas, obviously people who are in high finance or banking or corporate jobs, they might see this. But medicine people tend to check your qualifications. In business, if you provide excellent service, I have businesses. Most of my customers are British, and they buy stuff. They don't check too much.
Probably don't even know.
I go by ND. Yeah, so basically they want to know that you're responding well, you do what you said you would do, and you don't really sort of disappoint, and that really works well for them. But obviously, I'm sure that people have actually experienced different forms of subtle.
Yeah, and that's not to play down the experience of other people anyway, but I mean, you're just talking about your own experience as
my personal experience.
In this country, away from that, I know that, I mean, you've touched on your business, being a business. You want to talk more about that, combining entrepreneurship and your medical practice and all of that. What's your business about? Maybe we start from there.
Yeah, so basically, I'll say I've had long is relative. I've had a relatively long relationship with entrepreneurship. I think it started from going into med school, and I needed to raise my fees basically, and I did what I needed to do. And at some point, I started businesses that just provided a quick 5 minutes tutorial, 5 to 10 minutes tutorial on the chemistry experiment that are going to be done. I went to University of Nigeria, Nsukka, so UNN, and we had a chemistry exam coming up, and I was able to procure test tubes. And if you were buying test tubes from me and the litmus paper, which I got on credit, because they were happy to give it to me after I bought and came back twice the same day. They gave me like cartons of this. I'd usually sort of give a quick run over of the experiments and what you expected to see.
Yeah, go on.
First experience into university entrepreneurship. But after that, I had some other businesses where a lot of times you had ideas and you didn't have the capital, and then you either gave equity to some people who provided some cash, and at some point, after having done quite a few businesses that were with different levels of success, I had people inviting me to speak about my business, and then won a few awards. And it came to the point where I was now speaking quite frequently in seminars and all that. And another business grew from there because people started saying, "Oh, I love your suits. Where do you make them?" And I started a clothing line from there. And to interest you, all of it was made in Nigeria. Like the suits were made in Nigeria. As at then, wearing Armani or Versace or anything. In fact, for my final year graduation, I supplied doctors graduating with my sets. I supplied 15 suits. And I had sort of like a package where you get the suit and you get a shirt and a tie for free. Obviously, it's all built into the cost. And some of them are practicing now in the UK. So it opened to my eye to that idea of creating value and getting paid for it. So before I left school, I had websites that provided things like customized SMS. At some point, I did some consulting for because I learned how to sell online a little bit earlier, and some companies wanted to get online. Yeah, so that was sort of my initial foray into business. But even before then, I'd always been interested in a bit of finance. I remember at 17, 18, I started investing in the stock market, and this is basically trying out how the stock market works. And I remember using my last 2 naira, which wasn't very much, to buy newspapers to sort of stock market is doing, as if that's how the game is played these days. So that was it back then. But here in the UK, when I came back, obviously my first couple of years, I wasn't too looking to start a business. I was looking to do my master's and leave. But I set up a company first that provided medical services, and it started out as a sort of like a contracting consulting services. And of recent, also within the last 18 months, we set up Holistic Dimension Limited. And what Holistic Dimension Limited does is that we run e-commerce stores. Basically, we provide products. One of our businesses under Holistic Dimension Limited is babybumper.com. So babybumper.com itself is an online retailer that provides competitive prices on baby products. So coupled with excellent customer service. So this is just a nutshell, but these are just vehicles, isn't it, at the moment? Because the whole idea is to be able to create your own income and be able to be in charge of how your income flows.
Yeah, it will seem to me that you've always had that drive, and you just identify gaps where there are needs, and then try to meet those needs, as it were.
Exactly. Yeah. So we tend to follow an approach where we'll find the gaps. So then we'll go look for the product. We don't make a product and then say, "Oh, let's go find the market," because you might find out that there's no market after you spent a lot making this wonderful product.
But having done business, entrepreneurship
Interest.
dreams or interests. Interests, both in Nigeria and here in the UK now. How do you compare the two environments? Now, matter of fact,
Well, to be honest, I'll say in the UK, or I'll start from Nigeria. In Nigeria, there are lots and lots more opportunities that you can sniff out. Part of it is because it's a developing economy.
Yeah.
There are lots of things. It's easy to sort of just starting doing the business is not easy in Nigeria, but there are things you can improve quickly. Things like customer service. By just having a good customer service, you tend to just you wow your customers, and that could put you far ahead of competitors. Obviously, there's also the advantage in Nigeria. You have industries that in UK they are already well organized and they are taxed and they are set up. Nigeria, you can decide to, if you lost your job, you can put a table in front of your house and start selling gari, Ijebu gari for that matter. And yeah, and you've got a business. In UK, you can't do that. You need to get some sort of license and you need to register your business. And obviously, corporation tax here is 20%, which is not bad when you compare it to sort of like tax for people who earn salaries. So that's the advantage in Nigeria. Obviously, the big elephant in the room for Nigeria is the infrastructure. There's no power in place. There's no regular power. And if you had a business, I've got friends here who have big businesses in Nigeria, and they are spending a massive amount of money for generators and fuel and all that. And because they have to spend that amount, because they have computers in place that are powering equipment, and because they have to spend that amount, then they have to spend on the next issue that is usually a big problem in Nigeria, security. So you spend on generators, and because you're using generators, you have to buy inverters and all sorts of things to make sure that the power does not crash or destroy your system. Then you need to recruit security, to take care of all those things. All those drive the cost of business up in Nigeria. And even with all those things in place, government regulations can really change rather quickly. In the UK, obviously, you may not cite as many. Obviously, in UK, you have to think. Like for me to set up my business in UK, I had to use searches and all that to find out where is this gap that I can fill in before anyone else is sniffing it out. In the UK, so it's not out there. It's not like low-hanging fruits for you to pick. But there is a system in place. I don't have to think too much about power. I've never met my accountant. My accountants, we've been working together for 3 years now. It's almost 4 years. Yeah. So I send them my paperwork. They do the paperwork. They file in with the HMRC for taxes. And basically, I don't have to get generators or extra security, obviously, for the nature of the business and the rest of it. So that is also an advantage. Again, if I'm doing business with someone in Nigeria, there is also the third factor. We've spoken about security, we've spoken about infrastructure. The third factor, which is a very important factor that makes people come to UK, even multi-billionaires that have made money in other countries, is something called the rule of law.
Yeah.
It is a strange concept to some people in government in Nigeria, the rule of law. So if I'm going to do business with anyone in UK, I can within minutes find out who they are. I can find out what their tax returns are. I can find out, basically, even if you're not a business person, if you're just basically wanting to buy insurance for your house or your car, you can go to Trustpilot and you can get opinions and all those things. And if the person somehow bargain, you know that you can actually go to court. Because coming to UK as a student, within my first year in UK, I took a company to court, and you could imagine tiny me. I'm an immigrant. I was actually supposed to be leaving at the end of my master's, and there's this massive company. I don't think I should mention their name on the podcast because the case has been settled.
Okay.
And it's a massive transportation company. massive transportation company in UK. They run coaches, so I guess you may have figured out who you are.
Okay, just,
So,
just continue.
so going on a trip from, I think I was going from London to Manchester then, and yeah, I used to live in Nottingham, but I was going to do my exams. They lost my bag. So I had quite a few bags, having shopped in London with the plan of returning to Nottingham to go and, because then I was still doing my master's and combining it with my medical exams. So after trying so many times to get them to respond to me, and I felt like I wasn't being listened to, I took them to court and had to drag them all the way to Nottingham. I went to court. I didn't even have a lawyer because at that point I couldn't afford one, or I felt like paying a lawyer was a bit much for that case. And they lost the case. They came with a lawyer and a rep from their company. They lost the case. This was about the time my first week of working in UK. At that point, I just started working, and I remember I took one day off my first week to go to court, and they lost the case. And they had to pay me for my losses. They have to pay me for my day of missing work. They have to pay me for the cost of coming to
How
court.
much did they pay?
And if I had brought a lawyer, let us not disclose it. but it wasn't life-changing money. Obviously, you couldn't buy a house with it, but it was enough. Let's just say.
I mean, to know that, I think that's the thing about justice. To know that justice is served, that everyone is equal before the law. You can't just ride roughshod on me just because you're big. And you're absolutely correct. I think that's
exactly
the United Kingdom got going.
Exactly. So you see, if you're going to buy a house, or for those of us who dabble a bit in real estate, you're not too worried about the fact that if you give this guy money and come back tomorrow, the house is going to be belonging to someone else.
That's not something I worry about so much in
people
now.
Oh, it's not only in Lagos. It happens in other parts of Nigeria.
Well, Lagos is the one I know, and I know that Lagos
maybe you should try Abuja. Yeah, I live in Abuja a little bit, so I know that in Abuja, land can sell 3 or 4 times.
Wow, probably they learned it from Lagos people, maybe. Yeah, that's an interesting one, really. I mean, the rule of law, and I think it's something that's been entrenched in the system for quite a very long time, and it's not perfect, but at least it works. But so you mentioned the fact that if you're in Nigeria, I mean the entry barrier to many businesses is quite low. You can do a lot of things, and you can start business a lot more easily. I mean, so to speak. But here it's a bit more. You need to be a lot more strategic, think a lot more in terms of your planning, be a lot more organized and what have you. Because the things that you could be an edge, a lot of people are already doing that. A lot of people are already offering very good customer service. So you need to optimize a little bit. That's so I'm not a doctor. I'm just somebody who is, maybe I have a different kind of degree, so I can't get a doctor job.
Maybe at some point we should make you an honorary doctor from the number of doctors you've been talking to.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of doctors, and that's thanks to the Nigerian system that keeps allowing you people to live just like that. But where I'm going to is this: that if I'm not a doctor, I mean, I'm just another person. I don't have a medical degree. I'm moving into the UK. I mean, you'll find out that many of us moving, we are much more inclined towards looking for a job, as against thinking, I can actually start a business.
Yes.
Why do you think that's like that? Is it a question of the being socialized, or why?
Well, I think a big factor really to consider is the circumstances of moving. If you require a visa, for instance, I work as a doctor.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah, so I have to work as a doctor because my visa in UK is to work as a doctor until I get my ILR, independent leave to remain. I can't decide to say I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm just going to launch a mobile health company, and I want to give my full time. So that is the biggest factor. Is do you require a visa or not? So if you require a visa, most likely you need a job. The second factor really is if the person was not entrepreneurial in Nigeria, if they were not entrepreneurial in their previous countries, they may not change overnight, really.
That's true.
Yeah, so like you're doing this, you're doing stuff. I don't think you started it all in UK. You probably in Nigeria, and when you came here, you took some time, mastered the system, and then you got into your various endeavors. So is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't learn some of the things I'm doing now here. It's something I've known before then. I think what happened was just that the environment, the fact that I didn't have to think about getting generators or internet or whatever, just gives a lot more.
Yeah.
Gives a lot more impetus to get into it.
Yeah. And of course, it depends on what type of business. If it's a business that you want to do exclusively online, you might be more inclined to start here in the UK, because then I've seen people start YouTube stations, blogs, and all that, and they didn't do that when they were back home, and that's just due to the enabling, environment that they've gotten. I'd say it's just sort of like being able to get on the platform in the first place. So that in itself plays a big role, I think.
Okay, so just to, I mean, it's not impossible, as in pursuing your entrepreneurship interest or whatever. It's not impossible. And I think that's one thing that a lot more Nigerians, Africans especially, need to do a lot more.
It's very, very possible. In fact, you might realize that if you're organized here, you might actually do far much better. Basically, so I told you I live in the southwest, so I live in Cornwall, and that in itself is a bit of a journey. And because there are not a lot of Africans here, I sometimes order my food. So previously, if I came to London or Nottingham, I could just buy Nigerian food and come over, and before I just eat like every other food. But since I got married, my wife likes Nigerian food and she cooks it well, so we tend to order online. And there's a Nigerian company that does this, so I get Nigerian food at the same price as you get it in London or Birmingham. Really? Yeah, so they send, if you want even shaki, or you want more, or you want catfish, maggi, any type of Nigerian food you want, including pounded yam, they deliver it, and they deliver it in very nice, efficient packaging. Sometimes they freeze it in such a way that even when it arrives, it's not really, there's no problems at all with it. And so this is a Nigerian guy. He's come to here. He delivers not just in Nigeria, but in other parts, not just in UK, but in other parts of Europe. So this is someone that's come, spotted an opportunity, sat down, organize it properly, and you find that it's cheaper for me to order it online than to walk 10 minutes to the shop that is available, the Asian shop that is available, to buy some of those things. It's cheaper for me to order it, and he delivers it for me. And I can't imagine how much he'll be making, not just from orders from UK, but from other parts of Europe as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite an interesting one. It's quite an interesting one. So, I mean, anyway, if you're Nigerian, you're an African, you are listening to this podcast, you're living in the UK, or you're planning on coming to the UK, don't just think salary. You should also open your minds to, okay, what other opportunities are out there for me, and explore them. And let's not just get into the 9 to 5 rots. Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Ndubuisi. I think, we're almost out of time. I'll just say, in closing, I mean, if you have a final word to just say to round up things.
Yeah, of course. What I'll say is that,
especially around entrepreneurship,
yeah, I'll say with entrepreneurship, the most important thing is to think of what value you can create, and think of who wants that value. And even after you found that, you need to keep hope alive.
If that's because it may not work out immediately, and you just need to,
yes,
to be a lot more.
You need to keep hope alive. Yes.
Keep pushing. All right. Thank you so much. I think this has been a very interesting episode. Really.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Thinking with T. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or whichever platform you're listening on now, so you don't miss any of the exciting episodes coming up. Also, I'd like to hear your views as well, so do feel free to send me your voice notes or connect with me on Twitter. See you on the next episode. Bye.